Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I want to tell you about a recent trip to Paris and the photographs I was able to shoot on that trip. Melly and I have a friend who moved to Paris a couple months ago, and we had told him that we will try to visit him at some point. And in October, that moment had come. We had decided to stay in France for 4 days, meet our friend and explore Paris. Before going, however, I of course had to ask myself the question all photographers always ask themselves before a trip: what do I bring? And I decided to be a bit bold and almost risky, you could say, and I only packed 2 rolls of black and white film. I had a roll of AGFA APX400 in my bag and 1 roll of Ilford HP5, which was my first time, by the way, shooting this popular film. I chose to only bring black and white film for no particularly rational reason that I had. It was just a feeling. When I envisioned the photography I would want to shoot in Paris, I somehow mostly thought of black and white images, which for me is unusual, so I saw this as a great opportunity and decided to go with it. For some reason, I found that the monochrome look suits Paris, maybe because of all the old architecture. It just seemed right somehow, and now after the trip, I'm overall really happy with the results. The photos I just showed you now were the first pictures I took, as we had only just gotten out of the metro station and were walking along the river to get to our accommodation. This shot here is actually the very first black and white shot I got in Paris, which I think is such a great start. To continue the trend of me stepping out of my photographic comfort zone by limiting myself to black and white, this shot seems like a perfect addition to that, because this is street photography, which, as you know, I really don't do much of. But as we were walking past this woman with her dog, I felt an urge to get this because she was standing in a great position for a decent composition, and the duo were an interesting subject in my opinion. Somehow, I was lucky enough that many things worked out wonderfully here. The weight of the foreground in comparison to the background feels balanced, and the road is not overly crowded, which would become distracting. Although I do need to point out that truck, which I do find a bit distracting, but it's forgivable. A little detail I appreciate is the Eiffel Tower in the distance, which gives the viewer more context. Anyway, enough about this photograph. I want to show you one more from this first hour of walking through Paris to our accommodation. We were mostly walking alongside the Seine, the river that flows through Paris, which seemed to be a popular place for people to walk, bike, or simply chill. There was this moment, a couple minutes only, when the clouds let the sun peek through a small hole, and so suddenly all the possibilities got mixed and new compositions were to be found with the help of stronger light and shadow contrasts. This photo here being an example. I love how the composition flows thanks to the strong contrasty lines of the pavement next to the river. I waited a little for someone to pass the spot and was able to frame this person riding their bicycle as my subject. I love how the shape is mirrored by the long shadow and also the glow of the road behind that was still wet from the rain in the morning. I was having so much fun capturing the action next to the river from this higher angle where we were walking. So those were some more shots from the first stroll through Paris. There are 2 shots I'd like to say something about, this being the first one. It's another unusually street photo-esque picture for me, with this man as the main subject and the guy below on the stairs being the secondary subject. I really like the result. There is a strange relationship between the 2 characters and me. I'm looking at the guy in front of me as he looks at the guy in front of him. The situation actually evolved into something quite funny just seconds after getting this shot. The guy in the white shirt was making a selfie while the man in front of me was photographing the guy. So this chain was now made of me photographing the man who was photographing the man who was photographing himself. But sadly, I didn't shoot that moment because it happened so fast after getting this shot that I didn't have time to think whether this was worth another shot. Because I was shooting my film rather sparingly, my decision making was too slow and therefore I missed the moment. The other photograph I wanted to come back to is this one. I think something quite Parisian are the cafes and restaurants that are either outside completely or indoors but with big glass walls so that it almost feels like outside. At one point I was walking past such a place and couldn't help but notice this wonderful sliver of light that went across the table. So I got out the camera and shot through the window from outside. That's where all the reflections are coming from. While I really dislike the reflections, mainly because of the car at the top, which seems quite distracting to me, I'm still happy with the outcome and that I was able to capture the beauty I saw in the moment. So that was a sequence of photographs I took in and around the famous Louvre Museum. The place is absolutely fascinating. The architecture is so monumental with so much love for details, and the way the art is presented in the halls is striking. There was a lot to capture, as you saw. Two photos I especially like is this first one. It's actually very simple, but I think it's worth pointing out how black and white shines here. It captures the feeling I had when looking up to the high windows inside of the hall, and the way the light falls in with the texture of the glass roof. The colourless nature of the photograph concentrates my view on these more subtle aspects in the scene. The second shot continues this appreciation for the light, but adds a sense of drama by including one of the exhibited sculptures, which happens to be a pretty dynamic and intense one. I like the contrast it creates between the high energy of the sculpture and the calmness the walls and the lighting evoke in me. There's one more picture I took at the Louvre that I would like to show you. As I was walking through one of the long hallways, I came across a window that looked into what seemed to be an inner courtyard. What caught me here were the stairs, which again were designed in an elegant yet power-emissive and majestic style, as is all of the Louvre. There were a couple people in the area which worked well to illustrate the size of the stairs. I think the photo turned out quite nicely. Here is another shot I really like. Being the tourists we were, we walked down the Avenue Champs-Élysées to see the Arc de Triomphe, which was pretty cool, but I didn't feel like getting the straightforward photograph of it because that seemed a bit boring. Later, as we were walking away again, we crossed this road here where I thought the view was pretty cool actually. I think I got lucky because the big reason this photo works is that the road was empty at this moment and the only cars were the ones parked on the side. This gave me a nice leading line with the trees framing the Arc de Triomphe on both sides so that it looks like it's hiding. This makes the photo not as obvious as the straightforward one would have been. I did get another one though, which was very clear, but I still like that I got this version from an angle with the leaves in frame. Those were the last Paris photos I have to show you today, mostly kind of casual street photography looking down a road or a small alley. None of these last ones are particularly outstanding to me, except for this one. This is inside the Museum Orsay, where we wanted to see some more sculptures, and I especially was interested in the floor where the Impressionists are exhibited. This photograph shows the main hall, which used to be a train station and was repurposed after its retirement. I really like how they managed to convert the building into a museum while still keeping the feeling of the original use. As I was there, I didn't know that fact and just noticed that this place somehow feels like a train station. An impressive one, I must say. At the far end, there is a spot where you can look straight down the building, which made for a wonderful composition. I have to admit, photographically this is quite an uncreative picture, a simple symmetrical composition, which only is interesting thanks to the architecture, but I like it nevertheless and I think it's worth showing. Anyway, that wraps up my little throwback to the trip I wanted to make. After having my doubts at first of only bringing black and white film, I think it turned out to be a full success. I stick to my opinion that Paris and black and white film just go together splendidly, and I'm really happy with the results I was able to get on this short trip. I hope you enjoyed this recap as well. Let me know your thoughts on the photos. Do you agree on my choice of film stock? I look forward to reading your comments. Anyway, that's it for this week. I hope you had a good time. If so, leave a like, consider subscribing if you haven't yet, and I'll see you again next week in the next video. Until then, goodbye.